And I'm going to ask Stephen Armstrong. Okay, so thank you for coming. Could you please state your name and who you're representing and so on?
Yeah, thank you. Stephen Armstrong, representing Ballarat Taxi Cooperative Limited.
Okay.
And Joy Robson, Ballarat Taxis Manager.
Okay, thank you. We have your response and so on, quite a detailed one, and maybe you could outline your general concerns and so on, please.
Okay, thank you. Not sure where you want me to start here, but perhaps if I can just go over a number of the things that you've alluded to into your draft recommendations, particularly which concern Ballarat Taxis Cooperative. So yeah. I will speak parochially about that, if you like. Ballarat Taxis were pleased to respond to the draft recommendations, and certainly would like to congratulate the inquiry team for some very good initiatives in its draft recommendations. As you said, we've responded to each of the recommendations individually. However, we are concerned at a number of the recommendations being based on pure anecdotal evidence and assumptions rather than fact. We do remain disappointed that the inquiry team did not make the time to visit our depot in order to gain a first-hand knowledge of our operations and the service that we offer to our drivers, our operators, members and to the community in general. We believe our service is exemplary and would have welcomed the opportunity to provide a better insight into our operations to the inquiry team. Like most of the regional areas, we're a little perplexed as to the reasons for the need to overhaul our services, given the high customer service satisfaction results from surveys undertaken throughout regional areas. Whilst we should all aspire to improve our service, we believe we are starting from a sound base, and rather than throw out the baby with the bathwater, we believe identifying and addressing any perceived weaknesses would be a more desirable approach. We note the inquiry asserts a series of customer service deficiencies and argues its recommendations will improve these problems if implemented. I'd like to address some of these misconceptions which are noted within the inquiry draft report about taxi services in Ballarat and prove that these perceptions or assumptions are just that. In general, the inquiry alludes to poor driver customer service and increasing customer complaints, too few taxis and long queues at weekend peak times, short fare refusals, long wait times for disabled passengers, and stagnant demand and little service innovation and little choice of transport options. So if I might start with the first one, customer service levels. We've provided substantial data to the inquiry regarding service levels, which if dissected and analysed would reinforce our point regarding the excellent service that we already provide. I have with me copies of reports of dispatch rates and also pick-up rates which further support this cause. These figures taken from our previous 12 months of operation show that 97.58% of jobs dispatched are picked up within 10 minutes. That is, the customer is actually in the vehicle within 10 minutes from ordering their taxi. We have not received one customer complaint regarding short fare refusal. So we can't quite comprehend why this is a service that requires an overhaul. Complaints, let me address that one. In Ballarat, we estimate that our fleet undertakes well over 900,000 taxi trips per annum. Whilst not particularly happy to hear any complaints about our drivers or service, we take enormous pride in the fact that we have a very limited number of customer complaints per annum. I've recently obtained figures from the Victorian Taxi Directorate on the number of complaints received regarding Ballarat taxi service over the previous 12 months. The total is 9. One of these is regarding service, and 8 were driver or vehicle related. That is one complaint for in excess of every 100,000 jobs undertaken. I've got a copy of that enclosed to hand over later. Now, 3 of these complaints were also passed on by us as a cooperative in order to gain a profile on a certain driver who we would like to deal with appropriately. And of course that's become a little bit more difficult with our hands being tied by some restrictions as far as the accreditation process goes and the ability to financially penalise some of these drivers. Taxi shortage and wait times at peak periods, I'd like to address that. Ballarat taxis have been represented on the City of Ballarat Community Safety Committee for many years, and we work collaboratively with them, ensuring our 2 safe ranks service a late night entertainment area adequately. The City of Ballarat engaged their own personnel to evaluate the wait times for every Friday and Saturday night during the month of November 2010 using the CCTV footage. So that is, the staff in the City of Ballarat went down to the local police station and viewed the tapes from every Friday and Saturday night in November to ascertain the actual wait times at the rank. This report, again, of which I have a copy of for you, revealed that on average there is only a 16-minute wait time between 1am and 5am on Sunday mornings, and the longest any one person waited was 22 minutes. It also revealed an average of 1 minute wait times on Saturday mornings between these hours. There's a 1 minute wait time on Saturday mornings, Friday night, Saturday mornings. Also, since this survey was conducted, a private bus operator has established a night rider bus service 5 nights a week, which generates a very minimal amount of patronage, I might add. But this service would have further reduced these wait times, I would imagine. So we would welcome some specific idea from the regulator of what they consider are acceptable wait times at any given time of the day. Give us some benchmarks to work with and to work towards. We have no idea. I'm sure Ballarat taxis would fall well within those benchmarks, whatever they are. Disabled transport service. Ballarat taxis believe we have one of the best services for the disabled community, and in fact have been recognised through the Ballarat Business Awards for the service to the community. The Victorian Taxi Directorate could verify through our PPBS contract that we achieve a very high standard in meeting KPIs for this service. On average, 95 to 97% of our clients are picked up within a 20-minute time frame, and we allocate a lot of man-hours within our call centre to achieve these targets. So we take great pride in this service that we provide the disabled community in Ballarat. Over the last 2 decades, Ballarat taxis have increased our wheelchair accessible fleet, and which also double as HOV vehicles to an amount of 7. Flexible transport options and innovative services, if I can address that. Even though we consider our wait times are quite reasonable, we remain committed to offering the best possible service to the community. To this end, we have been working closely with the City of Ballarat in an effort to provide a flat fare proposal, utilising our wheelchair accessible taxis as high occupancy vehicles in order to improve service availability during the peak periods of demand. I also have a copy of that proposal, which has been with the City of Ballarat for well over 18 months. Should this prove successful, then we're willing to provide more of our Watt HOV vehicles to further enhance this service. We've previously contracted out one of our HOVs to run as a de facto bus route service between the areas of Sebastopol and Ballarat University, and also from Sebastopol to Buninyong. This service was trialled for 3 months and managed in conjunction with Transport Connections and Connect to Ballarat committees. Unfortunately, funding through DOT was rejected, even though the patronage was quite encouraging. Unfortunately, we were restricted considerably by unnecessary regulatory burden in offering many of these services. That is, the requirement to have only Watt accredited drivers, even though the taxis are being used for HOV work, contracts needed with another party for flat fare runs, and contract runs not to amount to more than normally would be on the meter. These are all burdens and regulatory burdens which, if removed, would allow us to offer a much more flexible service. We also provide services aimed specifically at the tourism industry, and we have a number of trained and accredited drivers who undertake this work. We've developed a tour of Ballarat with a professionally narrated CD, which takes in and gives a running commentary on significant points of interest and history pertaining to the area. I've also got a pamphlet of that, which we have and we put into all the motels and information bureaus around Ballarat. Choice. Ballarat has many varied options available to the general public and are well and truly catered for in this regard. Ballarat taxis, Davis Bus Lines, Vic Rail, Begonia City Hire Cars, Ballarat Limousine Hire, Victorian Patient Transport Scheme, Uniting Care Community Transport and Red Cross Transport, and Night Rider bus services, just to name a few. I also got a copy of a pamphlet outlining all those services that's developed by the Department of Transport. So I guess we get down to talk about, I hope I've addressed those issues with you, which you've outlined in the draft. But I get down to some personal hardship stories should, as a right entry of licences unfold. Along with the issues of not having the infrastructure in place and taxi ranks to accommodate extra vehicles. I have enclosed a number of letters, or I have a number of letters for the inquiry, which have been forwarded to me by taxi owner and operators who have opened up in a desperate plea for your inquiry team to understand what some of your suggested reforms would mean to them personally. Many of them have either invested their life savings or borrowed and mortgaged their homes and taxi licences in good faith. Most have invested in taxis more to secure full-time employment rather than any other reason, and have done this after investigating other business options. So it is reasonably difficult to comprehend the introduction of regulations which potentially could destroy people's hopes, dreams, livelihoods for no apparent good reason other than it being easier to have a one-size-fits-all approach. Some of these reforms will have the effect of wiping out half the asset value in the short term, and the long-term effect would see licence values diminish even further. This expropriation of legitimately held asset values to many are the superannuation holdings and represent their life savings, may have the potential to destroy some taxi owners, businesses and families. We would have many more owner-drivers who have recently purchased a taxi licence left with a substantial debt on an asset which value has been halved. Imagine the response from the banks and other creditors to this development, since they would have less security for loans they have already advanced. Have we not learnt from the New Zealand experience where a number of taxi owners were sent bankrupt and in some cases driven to the point of committing suicide as a result of similar recommendations being implemented? In conclusion, we can only assume that time or financial constraints have restricted your team from evaluating regional taxi services with a more hands-on and in-depth approach. The taxi industry is unique by its very nature, and there are very different needs across a range of distinct geographic regions. One town or city, even though comparable in size or population, may serve a completely different demographic or account more difficult geographical challenges than others. The inquiry seems to recognise this fact and states just that in documentation on regional taxi services, yet it still considers that the one-size-fits-all approach will address all issues Victoria-wide. This cannot possibly be the case. Issues need to be addressed on a case-by-case basis. Too often, regional taxi services are linked with the poor profile of our metropolitan counterparts, and many parallels are drawn, which is often not the case. In general, we have a much more community-minded focus and are acutely aware of any service shortcomings, which may arise from time to time. I've given examples in our submission of our associations with local government and community groups with which we engage. We are directly aware of any immediate service or safety issues by virtue of the fact that each of our co-op directors and myself are also active drivers of both day and night shifts. This enables us to address any issues that may arise before getting out of hand. We take pride in our service and are committed to continue improving and offering more flexible transport options to our customers. We are not opposed to reform or becoming more efficient, but our statistics do not reflect the need for such radical regulatory changes. As previously mentioned, we are restricted at times by unnecessary regulations from providing an even more innovative service. We do not consider opening entry for taxis or hire cars will have any direct benefit for the Ballarat community and will only lead to a decline in services, as in other jurisdictions where this has occurred. We do not agree with the theory that if you make more taxis available, demand for their service will increase. This is fraught with danger, and we cannot afford to play with people's livelihoods based purely on economic theory. The bottom line is that our customers consider that we run a very good taxi service, and we do supply supportive evidence which attests to this. I have a number of petitions from our customers in here, which amounts to hundreds of customers, attaining or attesting to the fact that Ballarat Taxi run a very good, reliable and safe taxi service. We have... Excuse me, I need a drink of water, I think. In Mr Fowler's own words, unlike the city experience, regional taxi users are more satisfied with the quality of services they receive. If this is the case, why potentially ruin a good service? Many of the recommendations have merit and we would welcome as an enhancement to our service. However, open entry for taxis, non-mandatory affiliation, open entry of hire cars and intervening in operator bailey commercial arrangements may have the impact of leading to a deterioration in taxi services in Ballarat. We do not believe perception and assumptions are a basis for making recommendations that could potentially destroy people's livelihoods.
So you're against more competition. I think that sums it up in a word.
I'm not against more competition.
I think you are.
If it's necessary, it's necessary. What I'm saying is, in Ballarat, over many years, and I've been involved in the industry for in excess of 35 years, and before that my family, my grandfather, been heavily involved in the taxi industry. I've been brought up with it, it's in my blood. I love the industry. I love the city of Ballarat. We do everything to provide an excellent service to Ballarat. What I'm saying to you is we do provide an excellent service. Yes, we do agree that there can be some things that are fine-tuned. There's no doubt about that. But we are restricted by some regulation. We're not opposed to competition, but we are opposed to destroying people's livelihoods through competition when, in good faith, they have built up integrity, they've purchased business loans in good faith that their licence values be worth something at the end of the day. Instead of putting their money into superannuation or investment properties, a lot of them have made the decision to put it into taxi licences. So I see no reason to destroy that asset.
Okay, now I just want to raise one point about the report. I thought the report made it pretty clear that by and large we did not have concerns about the quality of service in country towns, including Ballarat. I thought we made that pretty clear, and we've got a whole chapter on that. I thought we made it clear.
Well, I can pull out two pieces from the draft recommendations which depict that our service levels at peak periods aren't good enough. And
well, that's true, yeah, the peak period thing, but not the drivers not knowing their way around, that sort of thing.
And our service to the disabled community, which most of our drivers are really affronted by, because as I declared in there, you know, we think that we offer an excellent service to the disabled community. And in actual fact, I haven't had one complaint about our service of the wheelchair taxis in over 4 or 5 years.
I would not necessarily dissent from view that in Ballarat you do a pretty reasonable job on disability. I wouldn't say that for the whole countryside, and we're not hearing that from the disability sector. Maybe Ballarat does try pretty hard on these things. But the broader complaint we have about country areas is lack of availability. I'm not just referring to late at night, but in outer areas and that kind of thing. And we heard that when we were in Ballarat. We didn't go to your network, admittedly, unfortunately, but we've heard that in a lot of country towns. Lack of availability.
Well, I think I've just proven by our stats here that there's certainly no lack of availability at any time of the day or night in Ballarat. So I would contest that most adamantly.
Mm-hmm. Well, you were at the hearings down there, the meetings, and we did hear people saying out of Ballarat, in outer areas, there was availability problems.
Yeah, and I couldn't dispute that. There's certainly small country towns outside of Ballarat that don't have taxi services, so there's no dispute from us as far as that goes.
With other matters, we are happy to look at individual cases, and thank you for bringing them along. We will have a look at cases where there seems to be hardship and things of that sort.
I'm happy to read one of the letters out if you'd like me to do that.
Whatever.
If you think that's...
Sure.
You got time?
Read it.
Yes, really.
Okay. So this is probably a letter from one of our more recent licence holder. I suppose he bought about 4 years ago now. He's actually a young chap, but he's now one of our directors and a very nice fellow. But this is his response to the taxi industry draft inquiry. My name is Scott Parker. I've operated a taxi in Ballarat for 6 years. I thank the inquiry for the hard work the team has done in producing the draft report. I think the draft report raises some very good recommendations, including, but not limited, to the introduction of share rides and taxi shuttles, continued support of safe ranks, TSC regulation developed in consultation with stakeholders, expansion of the multi-purpose taxi program, keeping in mind it is a multi-purpose taxi program, removing duplication and streamlining service responsibility in positions, and utilising taxis for community and public transport. There are some aspects of the draft report, however, that will have disastrous consequences for me and my family. Please take a moment to consider my story. 6.5 years ago, I went through the process of being made redundant from Telstra. Having a very young family and being the sole breadwinner, this was quite a horrendous experience. After very, very careful consideration and lengthy discussions with current owners and other stakeholders, my wife and I decided to purchase a taxi licence. The reasons for this at the time were sound. 1, owning a taxi and being self-employed meant that we were guaranteed work into the future in a sound and proven industry. I would never have to go through redundancy again. 2, while having a job, the value of the licence would trace local house prices, as they have done in Ballarat since the early 70s, and thus become the base of our superannuation, a good investment. 3, it didn't matter who was driving, myself or my wife, it always left one parent home with our 2 young children, thus eliminating childcare, and it's very flexible. 4, perhaps the most important point, it gave us a chance to provide a great service to the handicapped, the elderly and the infirm, the disabled and isolated people of Ballarat. It gave us the opportunity to give back to the society that has given so much to me and my family. And so for the above reasons, along with extensive consultation with the bank and our accountant, we invested my entire redundancy package along with superannuation, undeducted contributions, a total of $80,000 into the purchase of a taxi licence and a car for $330,000. The bank will own 50% of the licence value. The rest we secured with our family home. Quite a serious decision, an investment not taken lightly. This gave us 24% equity in our business. An interesting fact to point out at this stage is that with the free market in our democracy, determining licences to be valued as such, it guarantees that new entrants do not enter the industry lightly. I know every owner in Ballarat, and every single one of them is utterly dedicated, committed and passionate about the taxi industry. They are very hard-working people of integrity, with 90% of them driving their cars regularly. Of course, lowering and removing such entry barriers will inevitably, at some point, attract less committed, even undesirable participants into the industry. How this can improve customer service and even customer safety is beyond me. 2 years after purchasing a taxi, I lost both my parents with a few months of one another. This left me with a small inheritance of about $50,000. For 2 years, my wife and I agonised over what to do with the money. After extensive consultation with other owners, the directors of Ballarat Taxis, and receiving professional advice from the bank and accountant indicating that we should buy a second licence, we did. We put our entire inheritance into a second taxi for $435,000. We did this in good faith for the reasons mentioned previously, as well as providing both myself and my wife with a job, so we thought, into retirement. Our modest bedroom, a 3-bedroom weatherboard home in Ballarat is worth $400,000. Now let's do the maths. The bank loan will be 80% of our home. $400,000 by 80%, $320,000. Taxi licences in Ballarat, after your proposed as of right entry, are going to be worth, you say, $200,000. It would mount an argument that licences are rendered valueless under the draft proposals, but for the sake of the argument, we will use your generous, somewhat vague figures of $200,000. We hold 2 licences against which the bank will own 50%. 2 by $200,000 equals $400,000. 50% of $400,000 is $200,000. So with our house $320,000 and 2 licences $200,000, the bank will loan us $520,000. We currently owe $610,000. Obviously that puts us $90,000 short. This, together with the fact that taxi drivers' incomes have plummeted in other countries where this sort of open-ended approach has been forced upon the community, means that to me and my family are staring bankruptcy in the face. The challenges forced upon my family and I because of your draft recommendation are immense. As you sit there reading this, you cannot even begin to imagine what we are going through. I sincerely hope that I'm the only person in the industry who has been thrust into such a dire predicament, but sadly I don't think this is the case. Another interesting fact to note while we're talking taxi licence values is how you came up with the value of Ballarat licences, factoring in Ballarat Taxis cooperative offices, call centre, fuel stop, and the value of the considerable amount of land this is sited on. Every taxi owner in Ballarat owns a percentage of this, which would add, in my rough estimation, somewhere between $70,000 and $80,000 onto the value of each licence. This would probably become as a surprise to you because during the investigation no one has sat down with the directors of Ballarat Taxis to get a better understanding of the industry and discuss some of the real issues facing the industry. Every day that I drive my taxi, I am thanked and repeatedly told what a great service we provide. It's ironic that I am now being so severely punished for providing a great service. In fact, I'm so confident in the service we provide here in Ballarat that the inquiry should come and see what we do and how we do it, and use Ballarat as a benchmark for the rest of the state. It's obvious from the recommendations that you're not operating from any sort of benchmark now. Surely this will be preferable to the destruction of many people's businesses, superannuation funds, and the associated pain that so many people will have to endure through cunning deregulation. But I won't hold my breath. One more point I wish to discuss on the draft recommendation is the introduction of PBOs based on the London minicab system. I think this proposal is nothing short of disgusting. With no training, no monitoring, no in-car security for patrons, these things can only be described as dangerous. They have enormous problems with these in London, and we know that. How anyone on a professional level could possibly recommend this sort of solution, along with the pain and assaults that go with it, is bewildering. I won't go on because he does go on and on a little bit more, but I think you get the gist of that. Look, and there's a number of others that are would be in a worse financial situation, and numbers that have actually gone into hock with their home and the taxi licence. Another guy who's actually sold his caravan so he could actually scrape up enough to buy the taxi licence, and some more dire stories that I could tell you, but I will leave them for your perusal, and I'd like to sort of place them as evidence before you.
Good, thank you. Do you have any questions?
What's your impact of the recommendations on the number of licence holders likely to be in Ballarat?
What's the impact on the number of licence holders? Meaning, I'm not quite getting what you mean.
How many new licence holders will there be, do you think?
Who knows? I mean, I think your assumptions suggest 20%. Am I correct in saying that? I mean, I haven't gone into this and looked at it. It's, from our point of view, it's fraught with danger. We just don't know. I'm not sure whether it may mean there's another 20 or 30 licences, or whether it's another 10. I'm really not sure.
Well, it makes a difference, doesn't it? Because
of course it makes a difference. I mean,
you're predicting gloom and doom in a way.
Well, I am. But the whole point and the basis that I'm speaking about is that I have evidence that there's nothing wrong with our service. It's not hearsay, it's not assumptions. Now, you're offering licences on an annual basis at a certain price. I don't know how many people would be likely to take that up. I can guess, and I think all you've done is guessed, because no one would know, in actual fact. So I think the question you asked me is probably unreasonable, but the basis of my presentation today is say why. I mean, 97.58% of our jobs are picked up within 10 minutes. That is, the person who rings is actually in the taxi within 10 minutes. For the disabled community, they're in the taxi within 20 minutes, 95 to 97% of the time. I'm not sure why you see the need.
How many licences, new licences over the last 5 years in Ballarat?
We've had 7 licences over the last 18 years.
7 over the last 18?
Now, they're all wheelchair, they're all high occupancy vehicles, which we put out at night as 10 and 11-seater vans to soak up
And how many of those have been obtained by the co-op?
all of them.
All of them, yeah. What does it cost someone to join the co-op?
There's an joining fee of $4,000.
4,000.
Now, with that joining fee, as I think I spoke about the letter, there's assets in our service station, in our land, in our offices, and they all take shares in the whole building and the assets of the cooperative.
So what would be the licence value at the moment? We've heard this, linkage between, if you like, the licence values and assets of the businesses in country areas particularly. And so what would you place the licence value at? Yeah.
Without the assets involved?
Well,
Of the business.
what would be a licence value for the co-op?
We have them on our books at around about 400,000, Joy?
That's separate from the assets and separate from the
No, it's
goodwill
not.
of the co-op?
Okay, well, I'll take it back. So we'd say 320, around about that mark,
As a pure licence?
as a pure licence.
Yeah. So, and you don't have a feel for what the number of new licences would be or where that would go in terms of a value,
I don't.
given the proposals in the draft report?
I would hope nowhere.
Yeah. Okay. One of the things you raised was an interesting point about the co-op, particularly because it's this question about being able to discipline drivers and so on, and you mentioned that the accreditation arrangements prevented you fining drivers. The point that it seems obvious to us is that networks, and particularly co-ops, which are under a different law, do have an ability to discipline drivers by taking them off the system. Why don't you do that?
Well, because in effect we're penalising the owner and operator of the vehicle as well as the driver. I mean, the good part about having financial and monetary fines is that it's only the driver that's going to be affected. When you suspend a driver, you suspend him out of the vehicle, and quite often the operator of the vehicle hasn't got another driver to take over. So you're penalising the operator or the owner of the vehicle as well as the driver, which is not an ideal scenario. So, and look, in my experience with drivers, most of them would prefer to pay a small financial penalty and keep driving rather than be suspended.
Exactly, I would have said. But if you want to have an impact, presumably.
Yeah, and look, and there's certain levels where we go to, and for generally a first offence is a warning and cancelling. A second offence maybe a second warning. A third offence generally a financial penalty, and a fourth offence, well, then you do look at suspension and maybe asking the VTD to look at revocation of a licence.
I had a few specific questions on some of your responses to some of the recommendations, if that was all right. I suppose one point one might make is we could assume that Ballarat customers won't get the benefit of a purpose-built taxi. You're opposed to purpose-built taxis.
And I only said that because it was based on the Metro cab, and we had a Metro cab in Ballarat back in the 80s, and it was a disaster. It wasn't built for Australian conditions. It was off the road more than it was on. The elderly population didn't like it because it was very difficult to access, and we wouldn't be going back to anything like that. Now, that's not to say there's not other vehicles, and I know that Jeff Kennett and others have been espousing the new Nissan vehicles and that, but the one thing I'd say, they'd have to be built for country conditions. Ballarat's bad enough, but when you get out to places like Timboon and Port Fairy and all other areas, it would be even worse. We're not dead against it, as long as the appropriate model's available. But it certainly wouldn't be the Metro London cab.
Okay. So we should qualify your response.
Yes, you can qualify that now.
Another thing that surprised me was the meters, because the report had some information on meters, which, firstly, examining a number of meters, we with the National Measurement Institute had some rather concerning comments about at least one of the meters, and then the VTD did some assessment of the accuracy of meters, and whilst, as you'd expect, the vast majority were very accurate, it did actually turn up one case where it was at least more than 10% out. But again, I see you're opposing the National Measurement Institute being involved in the checking of meters, which seems a fairly basic consumer protection.
Yeah, can I perhaps explain a little bit? Like when we sat down to look at those recommendations, we brought in 18 of our shareholders, long-serving ones, and we did it on a consensus basis. So whatever was decided out of that meeting was what went into the submission, basically. One of our directors is a meter installer, etc. He was asked some technical questions about what could be the variances. His opinion was that 1% would be the most he's ever seen a meter out. The concern of the guys from that meeting was that it might be an impost and an extra cost to have that regulation included. It wasn't a major issue, but anything that was seen to add an extra cost to what they already have to pay, I mean, given that the guys are struggling now and haven't had a fare increase for 4 years, I think that was the main motivating point against having the National Measurement Regulatory Body look at it. So it's not a major issue, but it is an issue.
So has meter tampering ever been an issue up your way that you're aware of? Again, we've heard stories about various fiddles that people do to meters.
No, never been an issue. I don't think there's any been, in my time involvement in the industry, we've never had an occasion where someone's been brought before us or the VTD with meter tampering at all.
And I was going to, another recommendation is this recommendation that we had some discussion on earlier this morning about information coming straight from the cabs to the regulator. Again, you are opposing that one, whereas the people we spoke to earlier this morning saw that as really a very vital recommendation.
Yeah, no, I think that may have been one of the recommendations where there is a number of points associated with it. Can you just point out the number, please? And I'll just...
Yeah, 4.6.
Yeah, again, for the same reason as I just pointed out, I guess, there was a concern about the extra cost maybe in upgrading meters to facilitate that, and they were of the opinion that the information you would receive is probably stuff you can get from the ATO or the taxi operators individually. Again, not a major issue from our behalf, but the cost was an issue for our members.
Thanks.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thanks for your time. And can I leave?
Yeah, we'd like all that, thank you. We'll look at the cases.